You go to dev.splunk.com. Because you work for a company that has Splunk, you're able to get a developer license. Splunk, despite what you might hear in the hallways, is free. For real, it is free. There's a free 60-day trial when you download it from Splunk.com that's fully featured. There's also a 10 gig developer license, again, because you just go into dev.splunk.com, request a license. That's 10 gigs of a fully featured Splunk environment if you want to learn, see how this thing works, what you can do with it. And then there's a 50 gig developer license that you can get that's just a standalone instance. And that's meant for customers to kind of extend your, worry about actually using Splunk, right? Again, it's a platform that it works better the more you feed it. Although I'm sure you're saying that's convenient, right? But it actually is the way that it works. Is the more data you put in, the better value you get out, right? So again, not going to go too much into this, but I want to make sure that we cover it, being that there's a lot of development types in the room. Splunk is a platform. There's a large ecosystem of community and development going on around Splunk. And anything from Splunk integrations, how to get data in, to building apps themselves. There are even companies that have their whole delivery is built on top of Splunk, on collecting data, providing analytics on top of it for security companies, for IT companies, etc. So dev.splunk.com if you want to try it out. And then, yeah, I'm just going to get into a quick overview. The main goal is just kind of, there's a, oops, didn't want to do that. Here. So what I'm going to kind of go through here is high level, an example of why or how you might utilize Splunk in with tool sets that are already around you. Again, for the people that were already in or that were here with us earlier, it's a little bit of a rehash, but what I have to demonstrate to you today is an actual microservice. It just happens to be a service. This could be anything. Microservices are hot right now, but if you go to this web page, basically you're going to hit a web front end that is going to run you through a store, and that store is being monitored by Splunk. Now, what is being monitored? I'll walk you through the different integrations that then come together to allow me to report on this store from every layer of the technology stack, from the EKS cluster and cloud services that it's running on, to the Jenkins build pipe that puts the containers there, to the servers that run underneath. I'm able to collect information from all of it and put it in one spot. And so just to go over a couple of them really quickly, or the landscape, a lot of what we're doing in the DevOps world right now centers around the fact that there are hundreds of tools. There are new tools popping up every day, new projects in CNCF popping up every day. And so as a Splunker, or as somebody, and again, for those that are new to the room, I came from the telco world. This was the strength that I learned about Splunk back in the day was integrations will always be endless. There will always be another thing. VMware was the hot thing 5 years ago. Now look at where we are, right? There's whole another thing on top, right? And so that's where the power of Splunk comes from, because again, being a platform, we provide a set of tools, APIs, collectors, et cetera, for you to get data in and then to work with that data so that you don't have to worry about the infrastructure of how you would actually end up working with all that data. Again, we are a proprietary company. We sell indexing software, but a large portion of what we do is in the open source. So whether it's building apps on top of data, collecting data, or contributing to open source projects, one of the ones they use here is FluentD. We all, another project we contribute to as part of some of the Kubernetes integrations that we do today. And again, it goes well beyond CNCF. This is just a presentation that covers a lot of the technologies we're asked to come in and talk about in the DevOps realm. But basically, it just builds down to getting visibility out of your stack, right? And so, again, looking at Splunk as a platform for data ingestion, not just, say, logs, would have you kind of looking at your services and your delivery in a manner like this, where rather than thinking about the technology underneath, about like, oh, I'm going to pull logs from here and then somebody's going to write a search from it, what you can do is work the other way. What do I want to know about each one of these stages of the delivery phases of what I do in my day-to-day, so that I can collect information and data to answer these questions in a timely fashion, and then alert on them, use algorithms to do fancy machine learning algorithms on top to know when you're out of norm, and things of that nature. And so, there's a ton of integration options. It is not hard to sit down to go from today, bringing data into Splunk, building a dashboard and alerting to Slack, or integrating into ServiceNow, or taking data from ServiceNow and then sending data back to ServiceNow. Or, and so again, think of Splunk as just that pipeline as data flows through the different systems you work with. It can come through Splunk and it can leave Splunk, or it can be consumed within Splunk. But again, just thinking of that data pipeline, and integrations are boundless. There's new ones every day. And again, for developers or for sysadmins, it's a wonderland. I mean, people have made careers off making successful Splunk integrations, right? And so some of what I can walk through today is some of the tools that might be of interest to you in terms of how we've integrated them in an example pipeline. My app is super simple. I have a GitHub repo that I'm taking data from through a webhook. I have a Jenkins environment where I'll show you kind of a fully featured Splunk app. It's a mature app, so it might show you the possibilities of what you could do with it. And then an EKS cluster that's running the actual app itself. So again, getting data into Splunk is as easy as using webhooks. For example, Git is built right in. You can literally just use what we have is called an HTTP event collector or an event endpoint, where you just throw in the right information, the token information, etc., and it will show up in Splunk, right? From the build piece, I'll show you app for Jenkins, Splunk app for Jenkins. It's a good example of what happens when you take data in from a system like Jenkins and then build the Splunk app on top, not just kind of pull the raw data in for querying. And then for infrastructure teams or for teams that deal mostly in system administration, we have a lot of different integrations, Linux, Windows, you name it. Kubernetes and EKS and cloud services are just the hot one right now. So we can dive into kind of the variants and the different kind of tools you can use to monitor that environment. Again, all in one spot. And then obviously we have things like VictorOps. Splunk is a growing company. We have things like Phantom and VictorOps that are coming in that we're using to build a kind of complete kind of new NOC, if you will, where you can go from data coming in to decision to action, right? So Splunk for the longest time has been able to trigger alerts or to reach out and run scripts or do automation tasks. We're just beefing that up so that we have a full-blown platform where, hey, it's great that you can see that you have disk running out, but how do you then remediate that? What does that flow look like? How can you condense that time to value out of a system like Splunk by making trustful decisions in your infrastructure? Any questions so far from anybody on the phone or?
I think you might be sharing this.
Yeah. Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was working on the TV there. Anyway, I'm going to jump into Splunk anyway. So, any questions? Okay. So I'll show you a couple of simple apps. As a Splunker, a long-time Splunker, I've been with Splunk for 3 years. I came from the telco world. I kind of like to, as I told the team before, I like to break it down to technology stacks. Generally, people work in domains. Even if you are doing cross-functional teams these days, in companies like yours, generally you have a domain, or the services that you build are built out of domains or glued together domains. And so in the sample app that I was showing, I don't think I was showing it here. So for example, I have a Dyn DNS pointing to a microservice. This microservice is just a simple little ghost blog that connects to a store. As a user, I can go through and interact with this service and I can place an order, right? Simple little app. That's how I make my money, right? Buttercup Store, we make our money selling that $9.99 app, right? And so at the end of the day, I need to make sure that that app is up and it's always available and it's always running. So there are many layers to making that app run. And so walking through a couple of walking through it kind of logically as we did in that view, I've got 3 major data sources or integration points that I'm looking at as a small startup running a crappy website. But again, you could take this up to enterprise grade where you have many different, like we did in telco, where we had many services interacting. So again, hopefully it's just a fun way to look at it. So our journey starts in GitHub. We basically, like I showed in that demo, there's a webhook. What I'm doing is I'm collecting every action that happens on my repo. So whether it's commits, pulls, issues opening, GitHub sending me alerts for, sorry, I know this is small. Let me make that bigger. So at a quick turnaround, whether have access to my GitHub repo or not, because again, I think that's part of what we want to show about in Splunk is we're like a layer that you can use to communicate to the world. You don't have to replace the way you do your job, it's Splunk, but the way that you present information and make it available to your org or to people around you is where we can help, right? And so what I'm doing here is collecting important information that I care about as a user from GitHub. Who's interacting with my project? Are they opening any issues? And do I have any software code that I have to go update because of vulnerabilities? So if, you might have seen Splunk in this realm where raw information gets sent to me from a source, in this case, GitHub. But you can see I'm using our search language to present that information in a more consumable manner, okay? If you just turned on a webhook from GitHub, you'd get a bunch of this, right? And what I'm trying to demonstrate here is this is how data comes into Splunk as a raw payload with a bunch of information that we are extracting fields from that you can use. And then you can tell a much more human readable story and condense and curate the information into one spot. Any questions on this? Simple dashboard, the type of thing you've seen in things, Grafana, other tools. However, the difference with Splunk is there always is the full fidelity data underneath. You can summarize it, you can make it, optimize it for storage so that you don't keep things you don't need. But when I click down into these events, I get the full raw payload. So whether it's a Git pull or it's a customer coming through my Jira website or through my, through my $1 million app, the game is the same here. Is kind of what we're trying to get across. So GitHub is a place where I've bubbled up some key information that I use to look at my app. Then I move to Jenkins, because once we have the code ready to go, we utilize an app that was built by Splunk called Splunk App for Jenkins that integrates into multiple places into my Jenkins pipeline, showing me build statuses, letting me drill down into test results or build analysis. But most importantly, for most teams generally, is the health of my Jenkins network itself, right? Making sure my slaves and nodes have the right, distribution of jobs, and then everything's humming along so that I can deliver my code to my apps, okay? So again, some of the stuff that you can do on top of raw data inside of Splunk, and what Splunk's providing is the framework for you to get to this level fast. You don't have to build your own website. You don't have to build all the frameworks, the visualization frameworks, the ways that you can visualize this data. It's all here for you, like a toolbox, okay? And so that's an app for Jenkins. And then one just kind of an app that might be similar to what you might do in a company like this, where as someone who knows Splunk, I just turned my sights on Kubernetes, right? So I'm running my app in Kubernetes, and I'm integrating using, again, Splunk will help you out with many of the connectors. So Splunk Connect for Kubernetes is a hot topic right now. People are using it a lot. So this is an example of a connector that Splunk has built, fully GA product, open source, that helps you move the data. That's all it's doing, get the data out, right? And then once the data was in Splunk, I was able to use it as a SME or somebody learning about Kubernetes environment and express this information to my colleagues, coworkers, production support team, NOC teams, etc. Okay, any questions with that? Cool, so this allows me to take that data to tell a better story about it. There was a dip in the logs here, being able to annotate and advise why these things happen. Again, we're all about the questions, like how many pods are running today? Is there a change in how many pods have been running? What happened here? Right? Like why did the cluster utilization shift? Being able to annotate and say, oh, this is because Matt disabled, took down the Splunk deployment inside his Kubernetes cluster. So I got a bunch of resources back. And then he deployed a Buttercup store so he could show it off to his new friends, right? So again, being able to then drill down and understand from a metric level or a log level or just a pure metadata level what's going on in my environment, okay? So an example, to get away from the idea that simply we just work with logs, here's an example where I'm showing all the pods running in my environment. These are not logs, right? This is metadata that's been queried from the Kubernetes API. This could be any API. It could be a cloud provider API. It could be an API you wrote internally. And what you're doing is interrogating it with Splunk. So Splunk calls it on a cron, gets information back, and then this, works with that information to present it in a manner that's useful. So I can easily come in here, focus in on the information I'm looking for. I only care about my Buttercup store. I can see what pieces of my app are running, when did they start, what node, what physical node are they running on, And then I can do cool things like this. Well, maybe I really care about that ghost pod, right? I really care about that front end. So I click that table, and Splunk can then correlate to other data sources. So this is metadata coming in telling me, hey, you're running an Alpine pod that's running a ghost front end. If I click that and search that pod name in other data sources, this is where a lot of the Splunk power comes in, is that I'm demonstrating a workflow here that has 3 separate disparate data sources, right? Metadata from an API, which you can see here. I'm showing you the raw example. So this is like the metadata for that pod being scraped at an interval. So I can do cool things like hash comparisons or monitor when changes were done, or do a little bit of an eyeball test about the status, or why is it failing, or is it being scheduled the way I expect, and then be able to jump right into the raw logs of that pod. So we're uniting metadata and logging in one spot from 2 different sources, but presenting it to a user in a console-like fashion. Okay, and make it easier for people to understand what's happening at any given time from any given node. Then we're also able to allow you to ingest another data source, metrics, right? So I can then, maybe I'm really interested in the performance of that particular pod. This is called the Splunk metrics workspace. Again, metrics are just another data source. Logs, metrics, metadata. Doesn't matter what new service is coming down the pipeline. If you cover yourself in those 3 arenas, you will be well informed. You will be a better production support team for it if you have the finger on the pulse of those major data sources. So I have a lot of data sources here, right? I could investigate a lot of things, but the kube cluster is the fun thing to look at. So maybe I really want to focus in on that ghost pod, right? And maybe I don't really write SPL. I don't want to learn another search language. I'm just a developer. I just want to get information. Well, a lot of what Splunk's platform is doing is trying to make it as easy as possible for many different personas to consume data. So for example, here, I can come in as an administrator or as a DevOps me that says, listen, I know I have a problem with a particular pod. I would like to see the metrics of that pod. The first question is going to be, well, what metrics do I even have available to me? And so this is a kind of where we've come. It's come a long way in Splunk, where we're trying to make that GUI experience simple. No SPL. The query language is there for when you want to advance and do more advanced things. But now I can easily come in. I can say, show me my usage, right? Maybe I want to see my usage of my CPU across all pods, right? And so now I can easily come in here, split and prepare information for consumption by myself. I can run an investigation and leave a breadcrumb trail, or I can share this information with other teams through Slack or through other means. But here I have not written any SPL. I can save it to a dashboard, create an alert to monitor for the team, maybe send a webhook to Slack first, maybe then send it to the NOC if I have to. And I'm doing this with no SPL, but all the while underneath, if I want to really get down to the nitty gritty of developing kind of advanced Splunk monitoring and searches, you can drill right in and be able to work with this query in raw data. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, now why would you do all this? Well, the reason that we're trying to do this is because you guys all come together as different teams to provide services and to monitor items. And what we're trying to do is to provide that lower level kind of digging layer so that you'll be able to create apps like this. These apps are not, I am not a developer, right? Like, let me make that clear. I did not have to write any sort of script language. Other than the search language for Splunk. Everything else I'm just demonstrating to you was done for me through the GUI. Clicky, clicky. You know what I mean? Something, real easy. What I was able to do was actually to focus on using my data. And that's what we're trying to get you. We're not here to say this tool does this better. I'd rather just look at here. What we're trying to do is give you a suite of tools so that whether I'm working in GitHub, whether I'm working in Jenkins, or whether I'm working in EKS, or if I'm supporting all 3 of those items, we want to lead you to a road whereby the SMEs in your org can describe what it is you've built and then go instrument it, right? So those little kind of, apps that you can build for the various technologies to dig around in the muck, to present, CPU, memory, disk usage, to get all those kind of signals, eventually should boil up into a manner something like this, where we have a premium app called ITSI, where I don't even have to go touch my data yet, but as a SME, when I'm building those beautiful Visio diagrams that go to die on SharePoint, or I'm building out service flows that I want to teach my 2nd level support team or my 1st level support team, you would be able to take those kind of rudimentary apps and integrations that I just showed you and get to a level like this, where I'm actually taking those different KPIs. This is a sample network, that powers that, some of that microservice I was showing you, the Splunk instance at least. So you can see I can do things like identify the health of my WAN. Now, what does that mean for you? It's going to mean a lot of different things, but you can see here what I'm doing is using integration tools underneath at that lower level. Here's a very simple one for you all to drive the point home. There's Splunk has a lot of toolkits. One of them is an app called website monitoring. Guess what it does? Monitors the website. It can hit a URL. It can tell me what the payload was when it came back. It can tell me what the response time was over time. That's a very granular piece of information, right? Like that's lower in that digging level. But what you're able to do is fundamentally deliver this kind of information and pass it on, right? So maybe me as the production support team for maddimo.io, I'm very glued to this KPI. It's very important to me because so for say example, I get a non-200 response or I get a spike in the response time, I might ping myself in Slack or I might open a ticket, right? That's the first piece of knowledge that got you there. But what you're going to be ending up on is a call where multiple people get on the phone, different teams, different items to answer the question, why is maddimo.io slow right now, right? And so even though that's one piece of information, that website monitor was the kind of precipice of our investigation or our ability to kind of go learn more about our service, eventually, so this is a Splunk app, a premium Splunk app that we sell. You can build this too. Right? Like there's nothing stopping you from building a rudimentary version of this where you just have a couple of dashboards that say, if this check is true, it's okay. It's green. Turn the number green, right? So there's a level to this, right? You don't have to go right to this level. I'm just showing you this because it's super pretty and it's kind of where you want to get to. But so for example, that simple little check that my WAN team is going to do that is going to bring me onto a bridge, I can now look at the kind of the history of this. I can provide analytics on top of the trend, but most importantly, I can see how does that affect the rest of my service, right? And I can follow that through, right? The response time for, Jenkins or Jira.igm.com or whatever is going to be directly connected to things like, does my data center have any power? You know what I mean? Can my data center even run this app? Does my core networking look normal? Am I able to reach all the routes? Am I, and again, so being able to, as a development team and as a production support team, lay these breadcrumbs. You don't even have to have the data coming in yet, right? Like these integration KPIs, as I drill down into them, they can just be gray. Like for example, you know what, wireless team, we haven't got to them yet. But that doesn't stop me from building in the SME knowledge to understand that they are an important part of this flow of delivering my website, my uptime, right? And so just trying to show kind of the different levels of adoption that we see in Splunk. Bringing data in, working with data, picking through the haystack, writing searches and scheduling them and scheduling logic to do things like scrape all my app logs for known error conditions, map error codes to vendor explanations of those items. So for example, we've built things that are, if I see a certain crash, I've been able to automate that away. Like it's perfect for DevOps teams. I see this kind of log, I take this action. So for example, I used to run Cisco Core for mobility networks. When we would see certain crashes, if we've seen it before, so Splunk would ingest our logging. It would also ingest metadata to understand it. Like we would create a table from the log saying, these are the crashes we have seen. We have seen these crashes and open tickets against Cisco for these items. If we see them again, we would be able to run a playbook, whether that's just opening a ticket or whether that's running remediation steps, right? And again, all of that comes back to having the data on hand to be able to make that decision. Have I seen this before? What is this normal? What should I do now? And again, getting back to Splunk being a question answering machine, right? You have a lot of questions during the day thrown at you or that come at you as part of running a service. We want to help you answer those questions and then share them. Whether it's on Apple TV in the hallway, whether it's on our new app, our mobile app, so you can do it on the run. We even got things like AR apps where you can run over, literally hold your phone over a server and see the telemetry coming right out of it, right? So, and again, that comes from the ability to collect data, index data, search it, and share it, right? So that's a bit about Splunk. In the DevOps pipeline, again, there's a ton of integrations right now, all depending on your tool. Mine were GitHub, EKS Jenkins. At Splunk, we're a development shop. We run tons of apps that we integrate into Splunk. Docker, Kubernetes, Jenkins, Bitbucket, Circle CI, and whatever it is you end up with. Hopefully, I can leave you with the idea that there are development tools available that if you can just get the data out, you can start this kind of journey where you can start that journey without getting any data in. You can just even back of the napkin what you would prefer your monitoring tool to be, and then start going to work in Splunk to deliver that as a living, breathing thing. Not just like hey, we had production readiness, this is what this service looked like on the day we launched it, and then a year goes by and it turns into some other thing that is nowhere to be found in terms of how it actually lives and breathes, like how it works, right? And so I'll stop talking in a moment, just kind of let it breathe for a moment, but I want to show you a quick example that might hit home that I did for another client, where they were a large-scale benefits redemption company, like through online, big US company. And what they wanted to do was they had a question to answer, which was login time was extremely important. Like KPI-wise for customer experience, the amount of time that it took to hit their web server and to load that page was a key performance indicator that they could not measure out of any, like they had many ways and many different tools telling them what their view of the world was in that login, but no tool allowed them to literally define their logic custom inside of it like Splunk did, where we're taking front-end logs, session IDs, we're creating what we call transactions by looking for different log events, stitching them all together and bundling them into a login, right? Based on what that developer knew was, this is the first kind of GET request we get, and until we see
Looks like we lost them in the boardroom.
Oops.
Mike's logging back in. Should be reconnected soon.
All right, are we back? Danny, can you hear us?
Yeah, you guys are back.
Okay.
Just
How long were we gone for?
I don't know, a good few minutes.
That's okay. You guys have already heard me spiel twice anyway. So for the people in the room heard it already. So people on the phone, what I'm doing here, we'll catch back up just so we can keep going. So if there's any questions on the phone, now that you're back.
You just need to share your screen again.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, after all this babbling, I'm going to show you an actual customer example. Okay, I'm doing my best to kind of like obfuscate it a little bit here, but whatever, it doesn't matter. What I'm showing you here, again, I've been babbling to you about, bringing data in from any source, being able to then sit down, catalog that data, understand what you have there, and then sit with subject matter experts to actually produce real production grade monitoring logic. Okay. The thing that I liked about Splunk when I was a customer, not on the vendor dark side, was they didn't BS me. They didn't come in and say, "Oh, I got this tool. It's gonna solve all your problems." It's like, but how could you do that? We duct taped a bunch of stuff together. If you can do that, I'll buy your product. But the things we have built are things that only you would know by coming in here and looking around, right? And in telco, there's nothing more true than that, right? There's no way you could have something that mimics what we built, because it's just a hodgepodge of technology that delivers a thing at the end of the day, right? So Splunk was it was a breath of fresh air, because we really do hold up a mirror. We say, okay, we helped you get your data in, but like now what? Like now, what are the questions that as a designer, as a production support team, as a 3 a.m. responder that you want to know? Like that you want to have ready and codified and running constantly, being analyzed for trend deviation, hooking into other systems to say, hey, Splunk says there's something wrong, right? And so this is a real customer example. We did something like you all. We sat down, we helped with the integration to bring data in from front end, middleware, and back end, right? Once we had the data in, we had an hour session with the SMEs that, everyone has them. Like the new guys coming in, you'll try and find them or make it up to the layer of people that know exactly off the top of their head what goes on around here. And then, you'll have, everyone else trying to keep up, right? And so we sat down with those SMEs, people have been around for a while, and said, what is the key? Like when you guys hit a problem, where do you solve it? Where are the pain points? Where are the places that get you to resolution faster? And so what we did was we modeled login time. So what you're seeing on this Splunk chart is a graph showing the yellow line is the average time taken for login. Again, and this login is described by you or by your best SME to say, once I get this GET request with this token, and I'm not boring you with the Splunk details underneath. We can break that open and look at that later. Again, it's about the outcome. And so what we were able to do here is identify after a cutover, they did a VIP cutover, and if you look at the timeline of this, it'll probably match a lot of issues you see and this is the life I lived, where midnight comes up or 9 p.m. Pacific comes up, the humans step in the room and all the things go to hell, right? And so what you're seeing here is before Splunk, before doing this dashboard, they had, synthetic testing, they had all the tools under the sun, big Fortune 10 companies. But because none of it was defined the way that was the truth for that company, they didn't find this. The Selenium testing, synthetic testing, checked out, everything looked good. Now, the fun part about this was a POC, right? This was the third day it was being installed in the company to do this. You can see the issue happened at 12 a.m. Because the team hadn't started using this as kind of their command center for the service, you can see they actually exited the maintenance window with an issue. That's like number one already here, this graph and alert. Like say I alerted, so Splunk has many advanced features. Again, it's new day. I don't want to fire hose you all too much, but Splunk could have easily just learned that trend. And when that yellow line spiked up, could have easily pinged you. Could have pinged Slack, could have opened a ticket, could have had the person that was doing the work looking at this saying, yeah, we made a change. There's something wrong here, right? So as you can see, nobody was using it yet. So it crept in until the person that was running Splunk came in that morning and solved it at 11 or 10 a.m. That means they left the maintenance window, impacted customers, and had to then realize, be on that good old fire drill 9 a.m. right away to understand what did we do last night that caused this issue, right? Now, the cool part about it is this, again, I can't show you this part, but like if you drill down into this, we have all the sessions. We have every single client transaction that went through that web front end. So we were able to identify the affected users who had anomalous login times. We were able to weed out known conditions, like things like, well, a login time is going to be longer if someone has to accept the terms and conditions, right? The login time is going to be longer if they put the wrong password in, right? And so in the Splunk logic that is underneath this dashboard, we're able to weed out all that stuff so that we were taking out the noise, right? We're identifying the noise and focus in on, no, these are real timeouts. And so what this allowed them to do is to understand which group of customers were causing the spike. It wasn't all their customers. And we all know that that's the hardest issue to track, right? Is when it's not hard down is easy. Everyone wishes it would just go hard down. That's the easy way to do it. It's when it's degraded. It's when it's some of your users. It's when it's, and so the ability to click down into these actual real sessions. Let me see if I can show you an example without getting, so here's a perfect example. So you see here, underneath that graph, so I use a graph to depict it because that's how the NOC wants to see it. That's how production supports wants to see it. But the drill down, again, where if it was just a time series graph like Cacti or Grafana, you see that spike, that's it. Now what? Now you pivot to some other tool. Now you go do something else to try and figure out, well, what does that even mean? Is that even real? Do I even care? Right? But in Splunk, we drill down, so we click that spike. The spike comes into this dashboard underneath, and you can see we are actually categorizing, using the Splunk search language, categorizing the corner cases that we might run into. So I told you how we were weeding out sessions in that calculation if they fell into these corner cases. Now, how are we finding these corner cases? In the Splunk search, we were looking for conditions. So again, that's what we want to get you across. That's not just searching through logs. That's literally building business logic with our search language to say, if I see this in the log, it means that. Or if I see this, it's just because of this. And so using error codes, session details, we're able to boil that kind of complex information, session ID, cookie, the total duration across multiple systems, and then, when did the transaction start and stop? So that they literally were able to solve an issue. They should have been able to solve it right in the maintenance window because they would have been more informed. They would have seen that the spike the spike happened, and then they would have been able to drill down and find out who was infected. And the root cause of this was VIP changes, right? You switch a VIP, not all the routes are there. Some people start failing, and now you got to go play goose chase, right? So hopefully that's a good example of like a real world progression of taking Splunk from, hey, we have all these logs, to layering SME knowledge over top of it, building logic to say, hey, when you get these logs, look for these things. If you see this, paint the color green. If you see that, paint the color yellow. I mean, I could have put emojis in this corner case. You literally can in Splunk language, like fire an ASCII emoji in there, and it's just yes or no, right? So, I mean, this is the kind of business logic that successful Splunk users graduate to, right? Yes, you start at the log aggregation and picking and hunting, and you always want to be able to go back down there because, like you said in this, or like I said in this example, you're eventually going to end up back down to the picking and searching. But the context and how fast you can get to that needle in the needle stack is what we're trying to get customers to adopt. Right? So, any questions with this? And I can share kind of like example searches that how you would create this. But again, being able to look up every member ID and every session of that member ID across a whole farm of hosts. Just that I know, like having lived it, I already know that. Like just the act of like, hey, I have an issue. Okay, what user are you? And I'm a network team, so it'd be like IPs for me, might be session IDs for you, whatever it is for different people. Just the act of getting that session, finding that session across the distributed service, finding the topology, like finding the chronological order of what happened when is a 3, 4, 6 hour ordeal for most production support teams. That's just what we see. And it's not because they don't know what to do. It's just like they have to go do it. They have to go get all those logs. They got to grab through it. They got to put it through some home-baked tool to like answer a question when we can codify all this so that it's constantly running, constantly being analyzed and alerting to other systems, and it becomes like your best teammate because it's watching when you're not, right? You can't possibly, as a human, be watching these trends constantly, right? And so some of the tool set that we provide is anomaly detection on trends, alerting to different systems, SNMP traps, webhooks, alerts, whatever. Or you can manage that whole workflow inside of Splunk as well with different apps that we have. So I'll take a huge breath. It's 10 to the hour. So any questions, any items that you'd like me to dig deeper on, any experiences you want me to share in terms of how we've implemented this with other customers? Anybody? Making sense? I know some of you have heard this twice now. I apologize for that. But yeah, that's really the world you're in right now. Right now, you're in the world of, you've got data in, and now there's a whole slew of options available to you now for visualizing, sharing, and alerting and analyzing that data. And so we're here to help as the Splunk team to, provide the tools that you require. We have SDKs, we have docs, we have training, we have a community, a Slack chat community where you can find me, and others. Don't take it from me. These are all your peers, customers, team, like right here on this Slack channel, splunkUserGroup.slack.com. You can just go to SPLK. Let me find the short hook for you. At least it'll be on the recording. Splunk, SPLK.IT/Slack. Just fill out a Google form. They'll approve you to join the Slack community, and that's all you see all day. Is just professional Splunk users who come in and say, "Hey, has somebody ever integrated with this? Have you ever messed with that? How do you get insight out of this data?" You'll find me in some of these rooms, a Kubernetes room, Docker room, talking about all the different kind of items that you might run into with Splunk. There's probably about 900 to 1,000 daily active users in there, and then there's Splunk Answers. So like if you ever have a question like, does Splunk integrate with SonarQube? Yeah, it does. Right? And so this is, and again, I was explaining to the team before, this is kind of the workflow of a Splunker. Google it. I'm not kidding. I get paid to be a good Googler. I'm not kidding. It'll help you too. So like Splunk and the thing, Splunk, how do I do this? And you'll find so example, I talked about transactions, Splunk transactions. Right to our docs, we'll explain to you some of the functions and query language you can use, some of the ways to integrate. Right, and then also our Splunk Answer site, where a lot of us have made our careers on this Answer site. Other people helping us solve business problems, right? So you can come in here and have a good conversation about transactions commands versus the stats command in Splunk, and when would I use one? When would I try not to use one? So these are all resources that are out there for you. And again, as a development team or teams in and around development and production support. This is a place where you can codify knowledge and get it working for you. Make it alive, make it alert you, make you monitor and analyze intricate workflows. Okay. So again, Splunk Answers, Splunk.com, our community website, and then hopefully we can take you guys from hunting and pecking to having some advanced monitoring options that you can augment your existing options with. Okay. I think I'll leave it there. That's all I really got. Any questions? Anything else? Open from here. Yep. When was it scheduled to?
To 4.
Yeah, perfect. So 5 minutes to stew on it. I know it's a fire hose of information. I know some of you have only ever heard the term Splunk. Maybe you've never heard of it. But again, the one thing I want to leave you with is it's not even about our tool. It's about the problems you can solve, right? And so, is there times when teams are not ready for Splunk? Sure. If you're really struggling to just do basic stuff, then yeah, you would just, you just end up collecting logs. Yeah, okay, that there is, Splunk can help you with that. But it's when you can pick up and start running on top of that. It's well beyond grep. If somebody tells you, oh, I'm just better off with grep, you're at the wrong level. You need to enhance your thinking above and beyond that, because anybody that says that is a liar. You cannot analyze 1 million messages in a minute like we can, right? We can tell you what fields are in there. We can already break down, oh, those 1 million messages, only 5 of them contain a word error. So take away some of that noise, and and share it and automate it is the key part here, right? So yeah, just places to get started. Like you said, internally here, you have some teams in here working with Splunk already. Other teams working with Splunk, and so building kind of a global center of excellence is how I've always done it, Like at TELUS, I was in network ops, wireless. I ended up working with IP core, with our security teams, just because, again, once you start demonstrating your ability to get this information, you become pretty popular, right? Because you always seem to have the answer, right? And that's really what you want to have around here, especially in a DevOps team, right? Why is this broken? Oh, because of this. Who's impacted? These people. Do we have to worry anymore? No. Okay, back to work. Right? That's really what we're all chasing at the end of the day. Right? So I'll just leave it at that. So again, as developers, as teams looking at it, go get your free license. If you've been told Splunk's expensive, for who? It's free for you. So at the end of the day, go grab it, try it. We have Docker images. So I spend a lot of my time today looking at Docker and Kubernetes. So we have Splunk images you can run literally on your laptop. Maybe that's one. Look how cool this DevOps tooling. This is perfect for you. In 4 minutes, I could go just deploy a Splunk cluster to EKS. Right, and so this is why we are investing in some of these technologies and looking at these technologies. But if you go to our Docker Splunk repo on GitHub, our images are fully supported out there so that you can bring them up, spin them up, play with it, look at some of the things you might want to develop or mess with without having to kind of kiss the big corporate ring every time you want to go do something, right? And I really want to encourage you to do that. But here, check it out. So if you go to our Docker Splunk repo, you can check out some of the test scenarios we've been doing with Docker, and there's a folder for Kubernetes. So whatever your flavor is, knock yourself out. But what Splunk's, we've already built a proven pipeline. We've been doing this for 15 years. We know how to move data. We know how to index it, make it usable and valuable. Now it's just about making it easier and doing that faster, right? Because let's be honest, I've been meeting with you guys for what, almost a year, right? It can take some time to get running with this stuff, right? To go from just log collection to a broader idea. So a lot of our stuff is to make using Splunk easier. So here's a Kubernetes cluster. If I'm a developer, I could spin up one single Splunk instance, like you asked, or maybe I want to study and deploy a cluster because I want to study how maybe a production support scenario might look. What we're doing is the walkthrough of how to deploy this is all on that GitHub repo. I'll link it out to you if you want to play. And so, hey, great DevOps tooling. This is the benefit of Kubernetes. I can roll that, I can declare that environment in a few YAMLs and talk to you guys for a minute while it spins up, and then I can go log in and I have a fully built Splunk cluster. Right? These are big kind of steps in the management of Splunk, unless you end up in Splunk Cloud, where we'll just do it for you. Right? But both ways have merit, right? Again, these are ways that I want to make sure developers in and around Splunk, even if you don't use it at work, understand how you can play with it, right? So Kubernetes allows me to have some pretty cool tricks. You can see I'm running a bunch of stuff in this namespace, but if I port forward to it, now I have a fully forming Splunk cluster. What's happening underneath there is the Docker images have Ansible built into the entry point. You don't really have to care about that. That's just the sauce we chose. But basically, you give it environment variables to say, you are an indexer, you are a search head. This is our advanced Splunk topics, but as you start to read about our topology, you'll understand how this thing works. And that can be found in this Docker Splunk repo. But if we go take a look, as promised, oops, port forward, broke. So I'm orchestrating the environment, take a look at the master, see if it's finished running. Control, F. It's still running. So what you do is you come in, you check to see if the actual pods have finished. Once you see that play change, your Splunk instance is up. And then in Kubernetes, it's really great for development because I can run this cluster local, test my integrations, mess with new data sources, ingest a bunch more than my license lets me. But hey, I have a 50 gig license. It's just my test environment, no big deal, right? We have, trial licenses if you're trying to POC something. So again, my goal is to get you working with Splunk, right? Know that it's available for there. And hey, even if you just use the freeware and solve a problem at work, you're one step closer to knowing how you can use it for the bigger org, right? So I'll just log in there just to show you I'm not pulling your leg. So I go into the master, voila. And so the cool part is, for starters, 5 years ago when I started, good luck being, meeting me in a meeting and then leaving that meeting and running a Splunk cluster, right? That was not those paths, right? It was like you spend some time, you learn that thing, you build it out, you do some homework and training. Now we've got, using some of these DevOps tools that you're using too, right? For your apps to make your lives easier, you can actually orchestrate a full-blown cluster, and you can see it's building right now. So those other pods are coming up. As I keep refreshing, you'll see the cluster will form, and I'll have a fully blown Splunk cluster that I can go in and search data from. And most of the demos that I do is I run a Kubernetes cluster, run Splunk Connect for Kubernetes, run Splunk in the Kubernetes cluster, and then point the data at Splunk. It's like Inception, right? So the Kubernetes environment is generating all this data, and I'm shoving it into a Splunk cluster that's running right in that cluster, right? Just as a demo, right? So that you can start getting used to, playing with Splunk. So you can see it's going to take some time. That cluster is slow and I have slow nodes.
Is Splunk on Kubernetes production ready, or is it?
Right now we're only in test scenario. Right now, the only things that is it production ready? Yeah, people already run it in Kubernetes. That question's loaded. Like, is it supported? Is usually what confidence level it runs already. This run. I've worked with many bleeding edge companies that are like, listen, Splunk, we're not waiting for you. We're doing this. So, if we provide the Kubernetes expertise, which I think is fair, you know what I mean? Just like if you were going to run Splunk in VMworld, you'd be responsible for running vSphere. You know what I mean? But it's totally ready. And so what's been waiting is just the orchestration pieces, because it's a lift and shift. Like, Splunk is the ultimate monolith. Like you asked before, is it the same binary? Yeah, it's the same binary. So it's production ready, but support is not there yet. Right now, we only support single instances of Docker images, which is stupid, but pulling engineering and getting them to dive into a new world, it takes time. But it totally works, and we totally have customers doing it already. One just down the street from here, big shop that was just like, screw it. We've been in Kubernetes for 2 years. We know Splunk. We're going to make this happen. Right? So there you go. Some easy ways to get started with it. Again, grab your free development license. There's 2 of them. If you want to do more like this stuff, cluster stuff, go to dev.splunk.com. 10 gig license, free, 6 months, mess around all you want. 50 gig license is for a standalone instance. So if you just bring up one Docker container, run it in there, you're golden. And you can mess around and start learning what's possible with the app. And there's no better way to learn Splunk than to do that. That's how I learned it. I was forced with solving problems in a telco. I found this tool, I ran and never looked back.